What's up, NBA fan? What's up, all sports fans? This your boy JB, host of the Behind the Bench Podcast Network and channel, giving a shout out to the rest of the crew. Shad, Kelvin, Jermaine, KB, Film Room, Big Dog, Talk Sports. That's right, that's right. Everyone who's tuning in today, thank you for supporting Behind the Bench. Subscribe to the channel. Help make this show the best that it can be. Hey, check this out. Check this out. When it comes down to it, man, this is what it boils down to. You know, especially in relation to the NBA. And in some aspects, sports in general, there's way too much hype these days. And don't get me wrong, man, we've seen athletes, arrive on the scene where there's much excitement about their player, much hoopla, whatnot. But for the most part, that excitement was generated by what they did at the previous level before they made an entry to the professional ranks. Shaquille O'Neal, right? He played 3 years at LSU, Louisiana State, along with Stanley Roberts. They had like a Twin Towers down there in Louisiana State when Shaq played for the university, when Dale Brown was the head coach. And then he got to play with Chris Jackson, better known as Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf. And it was this great buildup about Shaquille O'Neal, man. You know, I was excited, but that's when college basketball was at its absolute best. And really, in terms of popularity, it was in conjunction with the NBA. So when a major college player like Shaquille O'Neal entered the NBA, he already had a tremendous following, but it was based on reputation, what we saw him do in college. So when he turned pro, it was really a formality who was going to select him at the number one pick, which was the Orlando Magic, who had the top pick that year. So you felt confident that, he was going to come in there as a rookie and really rise to the occasion. For the most part, he did. He helped Orlando improve to a 500 record. They didn't make the playoffs, but they finished 41-41, if I'm not mistaken. And then the very next year, they brought in Penny Hardaway, and they would make the playoffs with a 50-32 record, and they just kept building from that point. But this is what it comes down to, man. This debate about who's better between Michael Jordan and LeBron James, this is, me personally, I never thought it was a debate. Because if you uphold the standard and hold on to what makes sports go, why people tune in, like long-standing fans, why we've been accustomed to tuning in and watching sports, it's really about, man, who's going to win at the end. Who's going to win at the end? Or as they said during the 96 Bulls record-breaking season, it don't mean a thing if you ain't got that ring. That was their motto all season long. Don't mean a thing if we don't win that ring. So they was focused on the prize, not just getting there. So what I'm trying to say is, man, in order to stage this debate, seriously, you have to lower the bar. That's the only way that, it's unfortunate. Like I said, man, and I'm using the Hurricanes' real name on this one. If LeBron James, if the talking heads and the sports media would have just allowed this man to play his career out instead of trying to prove a point, he wouldn't be considered the most polarizing athlete in sports, which he is. The way he's directed and carved out his path throughout his NBA career, it's created a great deal of polarization. And I'm very upset as a result of him being brought to the Lakers. At the time that he was brought to the Lakers, it cost me the enjoyment of watching my young players grow in their uniform. I was robbed of that. And I resent it. But when it comes down to, man, is this. You never heard this question being posed because it's based on logic. It's like let's say a boxing match between the heavyweight champion of the world when the heavyweight division was at its apex versus someone starting out. Or let's say a contender, like in boxing, it's a difference between holding a world title and being a world champion, right? Like when Sugar Ray Leonard and Thomas Hearns squared off for the first time, the welterweight, super welterweight championship of the world in 1981, Thomas Hearns was undefeated. He was undefeated. And this may be a bad example, but what I'm trying to say is he held the WBA title. But the WBC title was the most cherished of all the three: WBC, WBA, and then IBF. Well, Leonard reclaimed the WBC title by avenging his only loss to Roberto Duran. Therefore, he faced greater competition at that point than what they would consider Thomas Hearns. So therefore, he was considered the world champion in the grand scheme of things, whereas they saw Thomas Hearns holding a version of the heavyweight title. You see what I'm saying? It's a difference. So, and that made I couldn't think of another example right now, but what I'm trying to say is they talk about how many finals you go to. You went to 8 straight finals, although the Eastern Conference, anybody can look this up and they'll find the answer. Especially from 2011 to 2014. And then it even got worse from 2015 to 2018. To where, after Derrick Rose injured his knee, his ACL, and it was never really the same after that, LeBron James didn't have to face a superstar during any of his playoff runs for the next 7 years. Paul George was an upstart with the potential. They viewed him as potentially becoming a top 10 player, but he never really proved that he was a top 10 player. They would always say about Paul George, he had the ability of a number one guy, but the mentality of a number two guy. And that's pretty much been the career of Paul George. Toronto Raptors didn't have no superstar. They had a good team. But DeMar DeRozan, when it was money time, he proved that he was not a superstar. That's why they traded him to San Antonio for Kawhi Leonard. And as soon as they got a superstar, they won a championship. That was the missing piece. So Atlanta Hawks in 2015, yes, they won 60 games, but they didn't have no Dominique Wilkins on their squad. They didn't have no Dominique Wilkins on their squad. So he pretty much had a free ride. That's why even Kevin Love said, after playing with LeBron in Cleveland, along with Kyrie Irving, he said we was a super team that was the most underachieving in the league because they should have won way more games during the regular season than what they did. Look at Oklahoma City this year. They just broke a franchise record that, it's been a great franchise. We talking about, they was moved from Seattle to Oklahoma City. So think about that rich history they got. They won the world championship in 1979 with Gus Williams and Jack Sikma and Lenny Wilkins and the like. You know what I'm saying? And then they had good teams in the late 80s, Xavier McDaniel, Dale Ellis, Tom Chambers. And then, of course, Sean Kemp, Gary Payton during the 90s. And then the Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, James Harden years. They went to the finals in 2012. Well, this Oklahoma City team just broke a franchise record. They sitting here with 68 wins with only one superstar on the team. They maximizing their potential as a team. But Kevin Love said we was a super team that underachieved during the regular season because they knew in that conference there was going to be no resistance come postseason. So therefore, they weren't worried about seeding, and it seemed like they got a kick out of it. but they underperformed. But when they matched up against a team that had equal ability, you see the flaw in the way his teams are constructed in his playing style. Then you look on the other hand, here go a guy who had to overcome when the Eastern Conference was the premier conference in the NBA. The Eastern Conference was the more physical conference. And from top to bottom, when Jordan entered the NBA, that was considered the superior conference. Then it started to even out by the late 80s and throughout the 90s. Basically, both conferences in terms of degree of difficulty was practically even, for the most part. But Jordan had to face championship level squads starting out. When people say, well, he didn't win his first 3 years in the playoffs. Well, first of all, he got his team to the playoffs when he was supposed to get his team to the playoffs. His first year, he had to go against the 59-23 Milwaukee Bucks. Was easily a top 3 team in the conference from 1981 to 1987, only behind the Boston Celtics and the Philadelphia 76ers. They was cranking out like damn near 58 wins a year. He had to go up against Terry Cummings, number 2 pick of the 82 draft. Sidney Moncrief, Ricky Pierce. You know what I'm saying? They had a hellified squad. Okay. Then, of course, the Boston Celtics, which can you say? Prime, Bird, Mikal Parrish. Bird was a 3-time league MVP back-to-back. And for those 3 years, he was considered the best player in the NBA. In his prime, right? Okay. So in 86, Celtics one of the top 3 greatest teams of all time to ever do it. They lost 1 game at home. 1 game in double overtime by a single basket to the Portland Trailblazers with Clyde Drexler, right? So that year, when you go on the Boston Garden, just get ready to take your L. And they stormed through the playoffs with a 15-3 record. So nobody's going to beat that team that year. Then they had to go up against the Boston Celtics defending champions again in 87, 59-23. Right? And Kevin McHale, I think that was the year he really had his best season statistically. Then Danny Ainge was a hell of a player. Then you had DJ. They had the best starting 5 in the business at that time. So what I'm trying to say is his degree of difficulty just to begin to break through the conference was like the Rock of Gibraltar. And then here comes the Detroit Pistons. And then as the Bulls started to ascend, they played in the toughest division in basketball, the Central Division that boasted the Detroit Pistons, the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Chicago Bulls, the Atlanta Hawks, the Milwaukee Bucks, and then here come the upstart Indiana Pacers with Vern Fleming, Chuck Person, Rick Smits, and then here comes Reggie Miller out of UCLA. That was the best division in the world. And the Bulls had to methodically break through that. They had to methodically break through that. So it wasn't like this path was set for Jordan to win. It was almost like they were trying to build more resistance to keep him from breaking through. I'm just telling you like it is, how it happened. But what you don't ask what this question is never posed to these talking heads. It's never, ever posed. And it's simple as this. Just like when you in a major boxing match, or if people off into was that UFC or a tennis match, or anything that sport that's one-on-one. Who you picking with the money on the line? Who you picking with everything on the line? Forget this stuff about getting there a whole bunch of times. Well, Jordan went to the final 6 times. That's a lot of times. Kobe Bryant went to the final 7 times. That's a lot of times. Magic Johnson went to the finals 9 times. That's a lot of times. Bird went to the finals 5 times. I would consider that a lot of times. Didn't Tim Duncan go to the final 6 times? That's a lot of times. But the difference is everybody who I mentioned had a winning record in the finals. That's the difference. As Vince Lombardi said, coming in second, all that really means is that you're the greatest loser. He had to instill that mentality when he became head coach of the Green Bay Packers, who had experienced losing seasons for years before he took over as head coach. He had to instill that mentality. It's win or else. There is no other option. And therefore, that's why their Super Bowl trophy is named after the likeness and the memory of Vince Lombardi. He set the standard. He was winning NFL championships before they started the Super Bowl game in 1966, 67. He won 5 NFL championships during the 60s. He set the standard. He said second place, all that means is that you're the greatest loser, especially when you returning back to the championship game multiple times. The Buffalo Bills to this day will probably give their right leg just the experience winning that one championship. They went to 4 straight Super Bowls and lost all 4. Man, and it got to the point where I was at, and that's not even my squad. I was actually rooting for them. By the time they went to the 4th time, I was rooting for them to win. Like, man, you a football team, you're grown men out there, man, and you don't want, like human nature, you don't want to see them like lose all of them. And to this day, I know they be thinking to themselves, man, we could have just won 1. John Elway lost his first 3 Super Bowls. He had to go helicopter mode to break through and finally win the championship. Then he went out on top, won back-to-back. Didn't even think about, trying to extend his career. He went out on top. So what I'm saying is this. Ultimately, logic would tell you it's not about getting there. It's about winning. That's why they call it the championship. They don't call it getting there. NFL Hard Knocks. When you watch NFL Hard Knocks, what do they say the goal is? Every team has a chance to win a championship. Every team record is perfect before the season starts. That's what they say. Everybody's striving not to get there, but to win one. World Series. Do you go to the World Series to win or just get there or to win it? Do you go to the Stanley Cup championship to just get there or to win it? You put in all that hard work, right? Or even an individual sport. When you play golf, do you play in the Masters tournament, the British Open, or the PGA Championship just to get there or to win? Do you go to in tennis? Do you go to the Wimbledon with the thoughts of not just getting there, but to win it? See, when you start using logic, the more that this debate is unwarranted. If you apply and use logic, and like I said, Chicago Bulls was not my favorite team. I think people who tune into our channel, they know my team is the Lakers. Now, I'm not saying you even got to win them all. I'm not even saying that. But when you got one guy, now and then it goes another round. You got one basketball player that lost in Olympic competition twice, or international competition twice. FIBA Olympics, bronze medal. The other guy won. He was on the last collegiate Olympic men's basketball team that won gold medal for the United States. The last one in 1984, led by Michael Jordan and Patrick Ewing and Chris Muller and the like, Wayman Tisdale and the like. But Michael Jordan was the leader. He was the driving force. He never lost in the sport of basketball in championship play on any level where he was playing for the title. NCAA, Pan American Games, the Olympics. Then you got the NBA. And the average win total of the teams that he faced was 60 wins plus. He had to crack through the bad boy Pistons, who won back-to-back championships. I would say Detroit is one of the top greatest teams ever. They went back-to-back. Well, I'm saying at the end of the day, when you use logic, if you ask these talking heads that simple question, who you picking with the championship online? Forget the stuff about statistics I guarantee. See, at that point, you ain't talking about the competition someone faced. Because at the time when those finals took place in the 90s, nobody was saying the competition was weak. Only the talking heads who trying to spin history or trying to convince the youth generation of today that the competition back then was weak. But in real time, nobody was saying the competition was weak because it wasn't weak. Over half of the original top 50 greatest players selected for that honor and prestige played in the time that Michael Jordan competed in the NBA. Over half. It's a bunch of hogwash that they spewing to these young people out here. And they not being legit. And they not upholding the standard. They're not doing it. But if you ask who you picking, that means Michael Jordan participated in 10, 11 championship games in his basketball career. Never lost one time. Period. Who you picking? It should be easy. It should be an easy answer. I'm talking about with everything on the line. And you know the resume of both them players come championship time when it's money time. It should be the easiest answer in sports. Logic gonna tell you you're gonna pick the guy that never lost in championship play when the pressure is mounted at its absolute highest level. Jordan always rose to the occasion every single time. That ain't me saying it. History proves it. So I just want to drop that real quick. Please leave your comments and thoughts. It should be a no-brainer, people. But as they say, as I love to say, until next time, this is JB. This is BTB. This is Behind the Bench.